we're still a business. So, the truth is that it is harder and harder to break new artists these days. And so the way we think about our business is that our business function is investing in artists. And as the record label in all of the artist partnerships that they have in their portfolio business, our job is to provide the marketing. First of all, of course, make the record, but to provide the marketing vehicle for all lanes of their business. And so, not like a marker of our success is our artists. Are our artists getting paid? Right now, they might not be getting paid out from us because we're investing in them for the long term. But are they getting paid by someone else? Are they getting festival fees? Are they getting merchandise? Are they? Do our artists have a sustainable business because of our partnership?
What's going on? Welcome to the New Music Business. I'm your host, Ari Herstand, author of How to Make It in the New Music Business, the book. Third edition is out now, all formats, hardcover, ebook, audiobook, however you like to consume books, you can find the book. Today, my guest is Zena White. She is the Chief Operating Officer at Partisan Records, an internationally renowned independent record label with headquarters in Brooklyn. Zena has overseen global strategy for the #1 charting, Grammy-nominated, Mercury Prize-winning album campaigns across Partisan's diverse roster, including Idols, PJ Harvey, Cigarettes After Sex, Blondshell, Fela Kuti Estate, and many more. Zena is also on the board of a bunch of organizations like World Independent Network, A2IM, the RIAA, Recording Academy member, and what we spent a bit of time talking about at the end is this new think tank called Orca, ORCA, which stands for Organization for Recorded Culture and Arts. And if you caught my episode with Tony Kewell from Sub Pop, that's another label that's part of this think tank we talked a bit about there. And if you want to learn more, we're going to link to Orca in the show notes. And I definitely recommend you check it out. Read the full report, read the executive summary. A lot of cool data that they revealed and unveiled that you won't really find anywhere else. And these independent labels have essentially commissioned a lot of these studies and have opened their books to offer a lot of this data. So if you're kind of a data nerd and you want to get a look behind the scenes of indie labels, you can check out this report. But Zena and I actually today talk a lot about the behind the scenes of how Partisan Records works and where they spend their marketing money, how much they're spending, all the different marketing verticals. We actually, believe it or not, spent a bit of time on, I don't know if we can call it legacy marketing, but old school marketing like radio and PR and print media and digital and TV. We talk about, how these artists are getting on Fallon and late night shows and all of that stuff and what that looks like and how that happens and how it works and how much it all costs and, where all this money goes. When payola is illegal, how is that all happening? But also the new media and where they're spending their money and how it all works when it comes to marketing records in this day and age. She tells some interesting stories about how Cigarettes After Sex got off the ground. If you're unfamiliar with them, they have billions and billions of streams and they are globally famous, selling out venues all over the world. And they've been on Partisan for over a decade. And she talks about their story of kind of how they got going, which was really fascinating. And then just in general, just kind of how the label works. If you want to get a glimpse into an independent label like Partisan Records, this is a great episode for you. I really enjoyed chatting with Zena and learning a lot about this. And so I think you're going to dig it. Listen all the way to the end because we get into a lot of the meat and potatoes at the end as well. You can find Partisan Records on all the socials. You can check out their roster on their website. And you can find Zena White as well. Find all of us that make the show happen at Ari's Take on all the socials. But visit aristake.com. Get on the email list. That's where you're going to get the most relevant, up-to-date information about the new music business. We'll ping you when there's new episodes, all that stuff. You can find me at Ari Herstand on Instagram if you want to shoot me a DM or send me a message or something like that. I try to get back to everybody at Ari Herstand on Instagram. But right now, if you could just pause this, leave us a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, give us a thumbs up on YouTube, hit the subscribe, hit the follow button, all that stuff really helps. All right, let's kick into the show. Zena White, welcome to the show.
Hi, Ari. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing great. Um, I'm excited to chat with you. We recently had Tony Kiwa on from Sub Pop Records, and I know that Sub Pop and Partisan and other indie labels have teamed up for a really cool new initiative, which I do want to get into. But first, I'd love to just understand a little bit of what Partisan Records is all about, and maybe you can kind of give us some background on it, or where you're at now, or just how the label functions, and yeah, what you're all about.
Yeah, definitely. So Partisan Records was founded in Brooklyn in 2007. And uh, around about 2012, I think they started operating in London. I joined first as a consultant in 2015, and then later joined the payroll in 2017. You can probably tell from my accent, I'm from the UK. And I moved to New York in 2017, and it's been 7 years of great work. And for some years prior, obviously. But
Yeah,
from
for
my
sure.
perspective, I can only really speak to the last 7 to 9 years, and that's been really amazing. I think that you compared us to Sub Pop, who are good friends and who we really love working with. They are they've been around for about 30 years, I think. So
Yeah.
I think that we've been around for about half as long as them. And I think that something that we've become known for with our friends in the business is that uh, we've kind of been able to break through as a newer independent label at a time when it's been harder and harder for labels to have success. And in that sense, I think we have a brand, but I think that we're operating in a time now where fans are focused less on who the label is. And so that brand is really important in like business to business. Are we a trusted partner for managers and agents? So some of the bigger artists that we've had success with are a band called Cigarettes After Sex that are a global phenomena. I think we've sold about 9
Yeah.
million albums with them worldwide,
Insane.
and they've had like a very non-traditional route through the industry. A band from the UK called Idols.
Hmm.
We work with PJ Harvey. We've had a breakthrough success in the US recently with an artist called Blondshell.
Hmm.
A band called Ezra Collective, who are the first jazz band to win the Mercury Prize.
Awesome.
They just played on the UK version of Dancing with the Stars, which I was really excited. It's called Strictly Come Dancing. It's like, oh wow,
Awesome.
this like amazing, incredible jazz band that we work with, Ezra Collective, are our most crossover mainstream artist because they get
Yeah, that's wild.
these like major TV spots.
Um,
So we have a
yeah.
super eclectic roster.
Cool.
We work with the Fela Kuti catalog, an
Oh,
amazing
sure.
catalog of a band
Nice.
from the 70s called Samande. And generally, we're working across. We try to be not genre specific,
Yeah.
but we're working to find immediately identifiable voices enhancing the human condition. That's really important. Um,
Mm, love
so
that.
that's Partisan.
Yeah, well, let's talk a little bit about Cigarettes After Sex that you mentioned. And you said you sold, well, first off, I want to understand what 9 million albums, you said you sold 9 million albums. What does that actually mean in today's standards when you say
Yeah,
the band sold 9 million albums?
yeah. So it's interesting, right? Because back when sales metrics were and sales awards were initially developed, it was actually physical units, and so
Right,
you could very easily track that. But now
right.
a global sales figure, we talk about it in terms of streaming equivalent albums, so
Okay.
or SEA for short, and that's basically taking a metric, which I forget what the team's using because it's slightly different in the US to in the UK to rest of world.
In the US, I think Billboard says like 1,500 streams equals like one streaming album equivalent at SAE or something like that. I think that's the last. I think those are the Billboard US numbers, but I could be wrong.
I think you're
Does that
right.
sound
And I
right?
think that the
Okay.
UK, I'm actually very out of date on my UK knowledge, but I think the UK
Sure.
is a lot less. Might be like
Okay.
1100 or 1200 or something. So the team
Gotcha.
have to work to create a data standard on that. But it's essentially taking consumption and aggregating that. And it's big. And I think it's
Yeah.
interesting. I think like US is now one of their bigger territories, but the way that the band grew at first, US came
Yeah.
on board much later, which I think is a really interesting strategy for an artist. I know you have a lot of artists that listen to your show, Ari. I think that Cigarettes breaking through their debut album we put out in 2017, maybe 2016 actually. My date.
Yeah. The self-titled one with Apocalypse on it.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
one, yeah, which now has over 1.5 billion streams just on that song alone, and that debut album has billions of streams. But yeah, so tell me a little bit about like just kind of how they grew from since that debut album in 2016, 2017 till today.
Yeah, they actually, the band had disbanded. They were founded about 10 years earlier in El Paso. And for whatever reason, Greg, the principal songwriter, had left, moved to New York, and the band weren't active when somebody sent him, Greg, the lead singer and songwriter, a UGC upload of Nothing's Gonna Hurt You, Baby, which had been pulled from their Bandcamp. And that UGC upload, I think, had something like 100,000 plays at
User-generated
that point
content.
in time. And he was like, oh, wow, like people are engaging with my music. So he got the band together and they recorded another song, Affection. He was working in an independent cinema in the Upper East Side at that point in time. And he released Affection only on YouTube, but through the original Cigarettes After Sex channel. And that something clicked with the YouTube algorithm and that started picking up speed. It was, I think, whilst the band obviously don't have visibility on what that algorithmic code is, it seemed to be particularly picking up speed in Europe, Eastern Europe and Southern Europe, and was actually editorially placed on the homepage there. So,
wow,
a booking agent from the UK reached out and had said, I think I could book you a tour. I think there are fans out here. And so they were touring Europe when we started working with them. And it was like, 400 to 600 cap rooms, and most of them sold out. I think it was just maybe London that didn't. And so it's not usual for a band's initial starting point, because usually you would say to a US band, come to London, play Berlin, Paris, and then we'll build it from there. But they were starting in Prague, finishing in Lisbon, and doing a load of stops in between. And maybe London didn't sell out, but it was still like mostly full. So we kind of took that principle when we joined them as a label partner. We were like, look, like there's fans of this band potentially anywhere. And so I think that, by the time we started working with them, Nothing's Gonna Hurt You, Baby had 1 million plays at that point, and still relatively unheard of. But then we just saw it growing and growing and growing and growing. Released the debut album. They toured, they went to all these places, obviously on a shoestring budget in the beginning, and then just built a really, really organic fan base. So it's been a wild ride growing them outside of the normal industry gatekeepers. Not that, we can talk about whether they're still gatekeepers or not. But
well, yeah, I'm curious how much you attribute that early success to YouTube, to like, well, you said, the video was kind of taken off on YouTube. And we're talking 10 years ago, so 2016, well, 14, 15, 16, something like that. But was it was it the algorithm that like was pushing it? Was there just one big fan at YouTube that like popped it on the homepage and in Eastern Europe, and then it just like popped, got everybody excited there? Or what? Yeah, I guess maybe what you've seen over the years is, like you said, this music kind of appeals to anyone anywhere in the world. Like, yeah, how does that happen?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think if we could perfectly bottle it, then we have more streaming phenomena. But I
Sure.
think that reality is that I think Cigarettes After Sex write shoegaze love songs, and they're very relatable across languages. Even the name is like very. I think the name does two things, right? Like it tells you exactly how to feel, the name of the band, but it also in some places has like a little bit of a curious appeal to it, where you know what it means. Say if English isn't your first language, you still know what you might, even if you don't know what the word after means, you probably know the word cigarettes and you probably know the word sex just from
Sure.
the essence of what those things are. So I think that Eastern Europe, it's just all theory, Ari, but there was a huge, huge, huge following of like Cocteau Twins and a lot of those like late 80s shoegaze sounds. This music fit into the slipstream of, I'd say it's probably similar for Southern Europe. But it didn't stop in Europe, like now Saudi Arabia, they're on the viral charts there. And in Indonesia, it's their second biggest market. And, so there's like a lot of global audiences. Vietnam, people are like, oh, I'm just in Vietnam. They're playing Cigarettes After Sex in every coffee shop that I go into.
Wow.
So I think this like global thing just happened kind of organically based on the combination of the music, the relatability, the name. Also, I think that for why I love talking about them with people like you and for audiences like yours is I think it's a real example of how when you're as an artist true to the art itself and have this very uncompromising vision, that can work in your favor, even if it doesn't fit with the playbook of like the digital platforms now and how they say you should work. Because this band doesn't have a single video. They have all this YouTube audience, but they don't do much in the way of like, we're going to have this premiere on YouTube and we're going to talk to the fans. The things that YouTube say you should do this to get your channel engagement up. TikTok's been a huge driver for them. And they've recently...
Now, do they have their own TikTok channel that like they make videos and do the whole thing? Or is it just their songs catching, more or less organically with users using their music in their own videos?
They do, but it's really like there's a trend right now actually with the song Nothing's Gonna Hurt You Baby going right the way back to the beginning. It's this October, last October. That's the TikTok trend. And Nothing's Gonna Hurt You Baby is the soundtrack. And we're seeing like over 10,000 new creations a day right now for this trend. Wow. And but that's nothing to do with the band, that's the fans. That's fans like driving. And that's something that, when we monitor it and when we see it's happening, we'll like run with it and make the most out of it. But in terms of, they do have their own channel, but you could take a peek. They're not very active on it. And Greg has done some cute teasers for the new record. But it's, even then it's like in his own way. It's very, very much in his own way. So I think like that, only posting static images. Sorry, Ari.
Yeah. Oh no. No, keep going. I'm looking at their TikTok right now, and I'm like, they have one video. Maybe they took them all down or something. I'm trying to understand it
more, but they took them down. I'm like,
Okay. I was like, wow, they have 570,000 followers with one video. Good for them.
Really? That's how many followers they have?
Yeah.
570,000 for one video? Okay.
570,000. Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, and but hundreds of thousands of people have been making their own videos to their music, which I'm seeing also. Like Apocalypse has 150,000 videos. Like you're saying, Nothing's Gonna Hurt You Baby has 111,000 videos. It's on the popular chart. I mean, a lot of them are super popular right now. But yeah, that's pretty. Yeah, that's interesting. But I mean, to get back to your point. Go ahead.
No. I was just going to say, like, I think I just wanted to add quickly and then to give back to you, but they've uploaded a lot. When we've used YouTube, we've always had these like static images. And that's not part of the YouTube playbook, motion graphics, like have motion graphics for Spotify, for Apple, etc. And but I think that what it's done, like the images are really strong. They've always been like very specific images. And I think that what it's done is create this feeling of discovery for fans. Like it's their music to find. And then that's once they then take ownership of that and then share it with people. And so I think that just this quality of being like creatively specific that Greg has lent itself well to fans really owning their own discovery of it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of every artist's dream where they don't really have to do all the other bullshit that they don't want to do, like make these, videos, talking to camera videos, or following dumb trends on whatever, TikTok and leaning into that, or making all, random YouTube videos that don't make any sense or whatever, and just focusing on the branding, which is great. Now, they did come out at a time before TikTok and before a lot of this was really happening. So they kind of had that to their benefit, where at least it was just YouTube, and they kind of, I would argue, maybe, yes, the music's there and the branding is strong, but it seems like there's a bit of luck there. Like it just so happened that some random fan downloaded one of their songs from Bandcamp and like uploaded it to their own YouTube channel, and then it caught. Like that sounds crazy to me. I just like don't even understand how that happens randomly by some kid, and you're the label telling me that this happened, whereas like if I were analyzing this, I'd be like, oh, the label definitely manufactured that. They for sure like paid some kid to put it out, because that is happening on like TikTok channels these days. Labels are paying kids to make fan accounts and paying them to do all that and whatever. But yeah, that's pretty wild to hear.
Sure. I mean, look, like I think that if a label wants to come on your show and say it's all purely ears, then good luck to them. Like that, I don't think that's what the world is anymore. But at the same time, at Partisan, we're very clear that we're not purely data driven either. That everything starts with the music. That we listen to the music before we look at anything else. And so it has to be a marriage of that. But I would go back to what you said and say, yeah, like, sure, it depends on your philosophy on luck. Was it lucky? Is it just timing? But at the end of the day, I think something that we can all agree with is like that it's about what you do with it when you have that reaction, when you have that engagement, when that upload happens and people like it and are sharing it, what do you then do? Like, what are you then proactive about that is within your control? But I agree with you. Like, everyone would love to just do their thing and play to 20,000 people in Mexico City. Like I saw this time.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. I mean, luck is merely when preparation meets opportunity, and they had been prepared for the moment. And yeah. And they were ready for that opportunity, and so when it came, they seized it, and you all seized it together, which is great to hear. Now, I want to get back to something you just mentioned, which I think sets Partisan and a lot of indies apart from your major label counterparts, which you said we're not just data driven and the music comes first. Whereas, like, we hear about all the majors out there, especially over the last 4 years, and especially like in 2020, 2021, only data driven. They don't even, it doesn't even matter what the music sounds like, literally just like swooping up whatever the latest TikTok song is and signing, these kids to these predatory deals where they don't even know what's happening or signing, and they just wave big checks in front of their face, and then they get, their firstborn child for forever. And so it's like, I'm curious, when you say the music comes first and you're not so data driven and all of that, talk to that a little bit more and how you operate and how you A&R.
Yeah. So I think, people often ask, like, what are you guys looking for? And for us, it's always about something that's unique and immediately identifiable. Meaning, I think like a pragmatic way to benchmark that would be like, if I heard a new song from this artist on the radio, would I immediately know, oh, this must be such and such, right? So that could be, it doesn't have to be a immediately identifiable voice, doesn't have to be a vocal. It could be an instrumental, Ezra Collective, who I referenced earlier, are mostly an instrumental band.
Sure.
They've increasingly had some vocalists on the recordings, but not live.
Sure.
So yeah, like that's really, there isn't a science to that. I think that where the science comes in is kind of after you've identified that potential signing, and there is still gut in that initial part of the process. But after you've had the gut reaction, it's then like, who's the team around it? How hard is the artist working? Is there already a fan base there? Could we build a fan base? How would we build a fan base? So yeah, that's kind of the process.
Yeah, I mean, that's a bit of development that we don't really hear about too often from labels these days, or at least the majors, which just unfortunately gets a lot of the ink and a lot of the oxygen when people are talking about developing artists or the lack thereof. So, it's interesting because you said one of the questions you ask, is there a fan base? Which, it's, I think artists listening to this, like, oh my gosh, like Partisan is this the only label on planet Earth that like is really just about the music, or is like, don't care if there's a fan base yet? Because like we've been trained, or at least I've been, that artists have to build themselves up first before anyone will pay attention to them, because artists theoretically have all the tools at their disposal, and no one's going to look at them until, I've literally sat in major label meetings where they've looked me in the eye and they said, this artist is incredible, I love their voice, the songs are there, it's amazing, the record's unstoppable, it's like it's right there. I can't touch the artist, I can't even look at the artist until with the certain number of streams that they have. And I'm just like, what are you even doing here? If like, isn't that your job? But no, I guess it's not the major label's job anymore. The major label's job is to just like throw gasoline on a fire.
Sure. I mean, that's a great analogy. Look, right. I think that it's important to recognize that we're still businesses, and
yes,
myself and my cohort of the independent labels that are focused on artist development, Sub Pop being one, I'm sure. We're still a business, so the truth is that it is harder and harder to break new artists these days. And so the way we think about our business is that our business function is investing in artists. And as the record label in all of the artist partnerships that they have in their portfolio business, our job is to provide the marketing. First of all, of course, make the record, but to provide the marketing vehicle for all lanes of their business. And so, not like a marker of our success is our artists. Are our artists getting paid? Right now, they might not be getting paid out from us because we're investing in them for the long term, but are they getting paid by someone else? Are they getting festival fees? Are they getting merchandise? Do our artists have a sustainable business because of our partnership? And so there's always space on our roster for the right ground zero artist project that doesn't yet have a fan base. But the reality is, the advice that artists receive to build a fan base is good advice, because that gives them bargaining power in the relationship. That doesn't mean that they don't need a label, be it an independent or a major label, to come on board and help them take things to the next level. But
sure,
if you're an artist that has, 100,000 monthly listeners, that after we've got the point past, I hate that metric, by the way. Like, I hate the monthly listener metric, but I do think that it is the industry's favorite metric for a reason, because it quickly quantifies unique listeners on the biggest music customer
on Spotify. Yeah.
So, but if you've got 100,000 monthly listeners, then that's going to make us go, okay, well, this isn't like absolute ground zero. If you have 500,000 monthly listeners, then that's going to be like, okay, this is like, there's commercial potential here. And if you have more than that, then you actually have very solid grounding in a deal negotiation, because there's an audience there that we don't, that it's reducing the risk, right? Like, when you're investing in and if you're reducing the risk, then you're potentially increasing the amount of capital that could be invested in your business as an artist. So I think I would, if that's what you want, whether it's marketing support or advances.
Sure.
So I would say, not to talk ill of our step family, the majors, but I think
leave that to me. Don't worry, I'll play that role.
I'll leave that to you, Ari.
Yeah.
I think that there's good reasons to build a fan base. I also still believe that, it's that there's more that the label can be doing if they're collaborating with artists to build a fan base. I think one of the things that we've said a lot in our meetings internally and externally recently, Ari, is that the world now is a place where people need to see it to believe it in music. They need to see the metrics to believe that something can be successful. But at our company, we believe that if we believe it can be successful, we have to make it successful.
Love that.
So that can be, like, the reality is you don't always do it. It's like a long story in the music business, but you try everything and you try to do it without breaking the bank.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I love the belief and the trust and the confidence that your team has. Clearly it's warranted based on your track record. And I appreciate how you can jump back and forth between kind of the business head and then put on that, business hat or the creative hat, or, you're in a creative industry and that you're working with artists and it's an intangible product that they are creating. And it's hard to be objective about something like that. There is some magic to it that kind of you have to just accept that. But then at the same time, you talk about reducing risk, which is what anyone in any business is going to talk about when they start to quantify, their investments and their return on those investments and all of that. Now, you mentioned earlier a few ways that you do invest. You talked about marketing. You talked about making the record. And then you also mentioned that you want to make sure that the artists have a sustainable business, like they're playing festivals or shows or merchandise. Now, do you take how should I put this? Do you share in other revenue streams that artists bring in outside of just the recorded music, like merchandise or live show fees or anything like that?
Typically, no. Typically, we're our job is the label. We do have a publishing company, shout out Left Music. So where the artist is interested in also signing their publishing rights to us. That's another avenue. But you just have to look at the two rosters of Left and Partisan to see that they're different. It isn't like, oh, if you sign to Partisan for records, you have to sign to Partisan for publishing. It's not, or to their company for publishing. And on touring and merchandise, look, we're entrepreneurs. We'll do, if people want to collaborate with us, then we'll talk about what it means to be involved in other lanes of their business. But typically we're focused very much on recordings. And so the reason why I mentioned those other business avenues is because we try to take a holistic view of success. And often what we're doing, Ari, is pushing digital marketing spends towards ticket sales, because we know that if we're working with a developing artist, getting their tour sold out is not only going to create that real fan interaction for us to continue engaging with that fan with the music over time, it's also going to create more opportunities for them. It's like, oh, this is a sold out tour. Then we need to book them for more shows or put them higher up on the bill or get that press coverage versus, a tour that's not necessarily selling as well. So that's just kind of an example of what I mean, unlike how we look more holistically over an artist's business. At the end of the day, it's their business. We're not looking to participate anywhere that there isn't a deal in place for us to do so, but we care that their business is healthy.
No, that's great, and it's nice to hear that you will invest in areas of an artist's career that you aren't that aren't offering a one-for-one immediate return on that investment, like running ads for ticket sales. You're not sharing in that ticketing revenue, but you understand it's to everyone's benefit that a successful tour, a successful show, that's going to drive people to buy the record or stream the record or something like that, which will just will pay dividends in the revenue streams that you do participate in. What are the areas that you say that you invest in, and maybe kind of break down some of these verticals of what is typical when you're investing in artists?
Yeah. So the budget for a record is pretty straightforward. It's there's what are the recording costs going to be? How much do we need to spend on making the record itself? What are the marketing costs going to be? Or rather, what marketing costs do we need? And that is something that is harder usually because you need to factor in how international you want to be spending. What we're noticing a lot now, and I know that you're super well versed in modern promo, Ari, so I don't want to tell you things that you already well know, but
no, please, we got a lot of listeners here that don't know.
The more traditional methods of promotion, things like hiring publicists in major markets, running radio campaigns, paying for bands to go and play on television. Those things are very expensive, actually, and they don't necessarily drive sales. Now, if you've got a marquee artist, you want to be hiring press. I'm not saying that you don't want to do those things, but maybe when the artist is at ground zero in a very developmental stage, maybe you can use a smaller budget more smartly to develop, make it more of a content budget rather than a video budget. If it costs a minimum of 10 grand to make a decent music video, then maybe you take that budget for one music video and you make short form content that works. Maybe it's not full length to a track, but you don't necessarily need that in today's attention economy. So I think that really how much you're going to spend and where you put the money on marketing is going to depend on who the artist is and where their audience are. And then when you're more established, you can make sure you've got a publicist in France getting you those big opportunities when you go on tour there. And then I guess the other or just like manufacturing?
Oh, go ahead.
Product. Royalty costs, so mechanical royalties. Do your audience know about mechanicals?
Well, mechanical royalties are for songwriters, and those are generated from sales and streams. So what about those? So you pay those out for sales?
Yeah, we pay those out for physical sales and downloads. The streaming platforms pay those direct to the publishers. And
Right.
outside of North America, those are collected by a collecting society. But it still all comes into the budget because the more you sell, the more you have to pay, which is good for the artist if they are writing their own songs because they're getting that background the other way as a different part of the budget.
Right. Right. I do want to touch on the marketing just for a little bit more with the. I mean, you mentioned a couple very traditional avenues of radio, publicity, and television, which those have existed for decades. They're not something that we necessarily think of in like the new music business of just like where to spend your marketing dollars. Definitely, indie artists or DIY artists without labels can't spend there because it does. For one, there's just like a lack of, I think, understanding. There's still a lot of gatekeeping there, I believe. But give me some ballpark numbers, just what that even means when you're talking about radio. And you acknowledge that those three avenues maybe don't move the needle maybe as much as before, at least TV. But break it down a little bit. Like, what does it mean to spend on radio? How much does it mean to go to radio? And is that different in the States versus Europe versus Australia or whatever? Let's start with radio and just like, are you still doing radio? What does that even mean?
We are.
Okay.
No, we're definitely still doing radio. I think that what we recognize is that in developing artists and breaking them is, we always think of even PJ Harvey, this many records, 30 years into her career is still, we still think of it as development in the sense of like, this is a new creative phase for her. Like, could there be new fans you can bring on board? How do we re-engage existing fans? Like, there's always an aspect of development that has to go into a record cycle. And for radio, that part of the overall puzzle is still in the USA helpful for touring. So once you're getting an artist into bigger like arenas, then you kind of need a radio song to get into middle America. You've got coastal America, you've got the main metropolitan areas, but to really be able to reach people, like that's a way that still is effective. But the reality is it's only working for some type of repertoire. And commercial alternative radio in the US, when you actually go back and listen, like there's still a lot of music that has, like rock radio is still playing Red Hot Chili Peppers and not just the new stuff. So it's extremely competitive, and the actual sonics of the track and the songwriting is very important. So I think that you'll find that a lot of labels like ours, even ones that have their own in-house radio teams, aren't necessarily having a ton of success in that lane. But when they do, it can be a really meaningful driver. It's just nowadays radio stations are looking, they want to see 200,000 streams of a track per week before they even really are considering playlisting.
Oh, wow.
Where we would have spent on radio, and I know that you asked me how much, now you're like, okay, well, we'll spend on that commercial alternative radio when we're seeing this kind of engagement on a track. And I mean, the cost, honestly, like tens of thousands of dollars, which I think is why.
And that is, tell me what that means, because payola is illegal. So just to break it down, like you can't pay a radio DJ to play your song like you could back in the 60s. Like they would hand them an envelope full of cash and they would play their record on the radio. So what does tens of thousands of dollars go to if I can't pay the DJs anymore to get my song on the radio?
Well, first of all, it goes to a team, and and by the way, as an immigrant to this country, I'm probably not as fluent in this as some people, but
Sure.
I've spent 7 years at this point trying to understand. And what I understand is that there's a network of stations all over the USA, and they're relatively segmented, and some of them have like exclusive people working for them that you have to get the music in front of. And so in order to reach all those people, there's like different relationships that you have to navigate, which means that per artist, you have to hire specific teams. And those specific teams then basically have these relationships. And I mean, we've done everything from like competition iPads for competitions to like there's things that you have to pay for this station that opens up the conversation. And that's a very interesting, tricky area to get down. To go down.
Okay.
There was a pretty good Rolling Stone piece on this fairly recently that I would direct.
Yeah.
They're interested in that.
Right. So you're not giving the DJs or programming directors an envelope of cash anymore. But if it just so happens that you're sponsoring their festival in Mexico that all the staff go to and they happen to be there, it's not directly payable or whatever. Okay, so that makes a bit more sense. Not saying that you do that. I'm just saying that in general, this money, the radio teams, it's really the personnel that's helping out push that and navigate that world. I understand. Okay, when it comes to PR, publicity, TV. Talk to me what the focus is when you're working and engaging a publicist to work PR. Use an example of if they're touring France, that can be helpful. Where do you see it move the needle and how?
I think it's when there's a really strong narrative. We had a record from an artist called Beth Orton a couple of years ago, and she just made this beautiful record, but she's like several records into her career again, like another artist on our roster with an amazing 30-year career. And it was really important that we could tell that story. And so that is an example. Trying to think of a new artist, maybe Angelica Garcia. She's 3 records in with us, as in like, this is her 3rd album as an artist with Partisan, but she had 2 albums out on previous labels. And this is the first time. She's from El Monte, California. So she's from a Hispanic family and grew up speaking Spanish in the home, but English at school and in day-to-day American life. So she's very much an American artist. And this was the first time that she was singing predominantly in Spanish. And so there was like this really interesting story about cross-culture with Angelica. And so we decided to hire a publicist for her, even though she's more in the developing stage. And that I think was a really worthwhile thing to do because we're investing over her career and we want to make sure that the framing of why maybe people who've listened to her in the past should take a second listen, that framing is there for her. So yeah, that's a couple of good examples. I mean, I think that probably on the artists with smaller audiences earlier on in their career is probably more interesting to talk about than it's probably quite obvious maybe where the artists get bigger, maybe not. I should say, like, so when the artists are already established and you want to keep the publicists on because even if the reviews and the features aren't the main thing that's driving the campaign, there's certainly storytelling and it's like part of the overall cream of the marketing campaign. And we often talk about TV as being the cream of the campaign, right? Because we'll do a Fallon appearance and more people see it online through social media shares than on actually sitting and watching late night TV at this point in time.
Sure.
No shade to Fallon. And by the way, those guys have like a great production. The sound's always great. Like it's amazing for us and it's worth it. But it's kind of like, oh, they're playing Fallon. It's like a
Yeah, right.
statement.
It's a career milestone moment, and people pay attention. That goes at the top of the press release, or the, at least the EPK or something like that. It's just like they played Fallon. That's a huge deal.
Right. Right. And, like I remember Big Thief premiered a song on, I think it was on Fallon. And I think that's a great way to take a TV opportunity and make it meaningful. I think that there's a lot that you can still do with these opportunities. And I don't mean to say that they're a waste of time, because they're not. It's more just coming from a place of like, okay, we all have a finite budget, and,
Right.
or at least in that we have a responsibility to our artists to work responsibly with, like, to work sustainably with them. And so when we're talking about where to spend the money, and like managers always obviously have an opinion and have guidance in that.
Yeah. Well, talk to me. Like, I don't quite. So you helped me understand how we spend money on radio. How do you spend? And I understand how we spend money on PR. You said you hired a publicist. And for the listeners, most publicists, and I just did a quick Google search of Angelica Garcia, and I saw. I'm just going to shout them out. I saw. I'm assuming you hired Shorefire Media, because I'm looking and I see that they wrote press releases. This is kind of, for anyone listening, is like, how do you find who the publicists are at that? You can just literally Google an artist and go to the news section on Google, and all the, I see the Los Angeles Times piece, I see the NPR piece, I see, but I also see Shorefire's press release about it that put on their own website, and all publicists operate the same way, and they're not cheap. I've gotten quotes from them, and they're $4,500 a month minimum for 4 months, 4 to 6 months. Like, most indie artists can't afford that. And so I don't know what they charge you guys, but probably around that or more. But so I get that, and I understand what a publicist's job is. They push, they have those connections with the LA Times, with NPR, with all of these outlets and stuff like that, and they will help get those write-outs and tell the story, like you said. Talk to me about TV, though. I don't understand how you spend money to get. Are you paying Fallon? Does Fallon charge to get? Is whoever pays the most money can get on Fallon, or how does that work?
No, we're paying, and actually, in fact, due to the unions, I believe that the TV shows have to pay the musicians. However,
Okay.
the usually when, obviously, Surefire, the way it works, the way that publicity works in the US is that Surefire, as an example, are taking care of all print, digital, and television media.
Okay.
But in the UK, for example, which is obviously a market a fifth of the size of the US,
Right.
You have a separate press agent, a separate TV plugger, we call them in the UK, and a separate radio team as well. So those costs add up, but they're relative, right? Because again, you've got this like much bigger market in the UK. Like it's not necessarily less affordable than going the US route. So obviously you're paying the publicist. That's just expense. But then once you get the TV booking, usually there's a cost to help get the band there. So, once we had to do a fly-in for a Jimmy Fallon performance, and it was a perfect timing for the band, but they were already at a bigger point in their career, and they needed to bring all their crew, and that cost $50,000. And
Wow.
Then you're making a
that makes
call of
sense.
like, all right, is this going to be $50,000 worth of sales? And the answer is almost definitely no.
Right.
It's going to
Yeah.
be, but once you add the TV to the next opportunity that they get, like off the back of doing it, then it should get to $50,000 worth of sales. The ROI isn't against the one opportunity. The ROI is against the campaign as a whole. And that's what I mean by TV's the cream on the campaign. And that's how you would typically decide whether it's a worthwhile spend or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like these more traditional publicists that will work, what'd you call it? Press, print, TV and what was the other pillar you mentioned?
I think I said digital print and television for the
Oh
US.
yeah, digital print and television. Um, so that so that I understand that, but the return is not going to be a 1-to-1 necessarily for that, and it's like it's hard for I think a lot of indie artists, and I'm assuming labels as well, like just to gauge what is going to be the return. Like, okay, 50 grand to just fly him out to get to Fallon, but a PR campaign, you might be paying a publicist 30, 40, 50 grand at the end of that too. And it's just like, did that move the needle enough to like bring in revenue? And is there separate publicists, I should ask this now, that are handling tour PR, like you mentioned, maybe, and is it more or less effective in the States versus Europe or elsewhere? In terms of moving tickets.
Yeah. Like I have a couple of things to say on that. So
Sure.
First of all, for your audience, I would say if you do think, okay, I'm at a point now where I do want to hire a publicist, if they give you a monthly rate, think about how long you need them to work along your campaign and try and cap it out. Like try and negotiate to say, well, I have the total budget of whatever it is, and see if you can negotiate with them. And oftentimes, if they really want to work a project for a number of reasons, it will be quite straightforward to negotiate a rate that is going to work for your budget. And especially if you're willing to be flexible in like the months that you need their work. You might have like a 12-month or 18-month campaign planned, but you only need them to work through certain phases in order to promote certain aspects. So That would be my first tip. My second comment, I've forgotten what it was now. Damn, it was going to be so good.
About maybe tour press?
Tour press, yes. Thank you. So The tour press, this is a great question because coming here from the UK, I was really surprised to find that there aren't regional publicists. There aren't regional independent publicists that I can find. If any listener knows of a regional independent music publicist, let me know. But like the USA is huge.
Yeah.
In the UK, tiny country, we have like national press, and then there's regional publicists that like do everything from like, the local paper that comes on a Saturday morning to doing like college press. So I was really, really surprised that as the music industry evolved, like when I got into the music industry in 2008, like all of these layoffs from the majors, I would have thought that at that point in time, someone would have set up like a regional PR company that focused on tour press for touring musicians. Like there's such an economy for touring musicians in this country. And my experience with tour press is that the big publicity firms, no shade to them, because I know that, we pay them and we say, we need you to do tour press. They do their job, but they're really focused on national press. They're really focused on like marquee, shiny pieces, the NPR feature, the Pitchfork review, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're not really looking at like the Delaware Daily News or whatever the regional would be.
Which it arguably does a better job at moving tickets, the Delaware Daily News or than NPR would. Like I just on a personal note, I remember when I was touring through, I was on tour and I was going through one market. It was Madison, Wisconsin, and where I actually went to high school, but I hadn't lived there for many, many years, and I just like didn't really have like there were no tickets that were selling for this show like a week or 2 weeks out. And we're like, holy shit, like I'm playing a 500 cap room and we sold like 20 tickets. I'm like, what am I gonna do? And we got this like incredible feature in like the free weekly arts newspaper there that most cities have, and it just like happened a week prior, and then we ended up almost selling out because of like this one feature on this one like free weekly newspaper, and it was wild to me. And because even at the time, it's just like this wasn't that long ago, and it was like that still moved tickets, and I wouldn't have even thought that like that local press stuff would move tickets, but it still does. And to your point, it's just like, if the goal is to move tickets in a local market, then go to where those local ticket buyers exist, and what are they doing? And they're still, we might not understand it being on the coasts, but like, they're still grabbing that local free weekly newspaper. My friends from back home, they're still reading that every week. They're still looking at it. Like, they still look at what concerts are happening and which is like wild to me because I haven't held a newspaper in years. But yeah, it still works.
Right. And, like they probably have like a online or social channels these days, right? And I think like
Yep.
that's it. We talk about it as pocket journalism at Partisan. Like, I think that nowadays we've spent a minute here talking about traditional publicity options, but
Yes.
nowadays all of these opportunities are about getting on this thing. It's like, how do you get into the phone, the scroll, the whatever it is, and I think that local towns definitely do have their little outlets that monitor the shows and stuff. But I don't know, like,
absolutely,
I'm really,
all those
if anyone listeners have like want to pitch us on this, like, I'm all ears. Like,
I mean, I do know I lived in Minneapolis for many years, and they did have local publicists there, and it seemed like every local Minneapolis band was using, Krista, who was like, shout out to Krista, the publicist that just like everybody used, and she would like, and she knew everyone in town, and so when you were like you'd get in the city pages, and you'd get on the Current, and you'd get on like all the stuff that meant something locally, but like didn't really mean anything outside of our local market. And I'm assuming that every local town has a Krista out there that just has built a business with their very local community. And it's not even the traditional media as much anymore. I mean, it is, and like you said, they all have thriving social media channels where the local community follows for just what's happening. It's not, you're not holding the newspaper as much anymore, maybe even like listening to the AM FM radio. But yes, they all have now built up their followings on social media as well. But so I mean, speaking of, that's a nice transition to kind of new media and new marketing techniques. Where's the spend happening on the marketing spend for new media, and what does that look like?
Well, this is where I say, like, I have an amazing team, and this is a rapidly changing area.
Sure.
But I think that it really depends on the artist. Like, there's certainly influencers. There's there's certainly a role of influencers, but where we've tried to go out and do like reach big influencer channels or reach audiences through big influencer channels, it hasn't necessarily connected. What's really worked for us well is something as simple as seeing where the natural fans might be and inviting them to the show or sending them the record. Like, these are things that don't necessarily cost money. It's time and that you need to put into it, but anyone can do that. And I think that has been really nice and led to some really organic pieces, because I think now we're in we're kind of swinging back to there being like tastemaker personalities online again. I think for a long time it was so playlist driven, and now we're kind of in this place where people want to be, they want some human guidance on like what to unearth. Shout out to Margot Labatt if anyone subscribes to marg.mp3 on Instagram or TikTok. But I think that Margot's channels are an amazing music discovery platform. She's really doing something interesting there, and she really likes to share things that no one's ever heard before. So
how do you get to her? And when we're talking marketing spend, I mean, are you paying Margot Marg.mp3 to like push your music, or what does that mean? So tell me how that works with
Margot's purely she's pure in her editorial choices.
Okay.
But I think the point is simply, there's more. There are more channels out there now that you can access. It's hard to, it's up to Margot if she wants to program your music or not, but I'm sure she's going to listen if you send it to her.
Mm-hmm.
And in like spends, I don't know. You'd have to ask my team, Ari, but you're welcome to have them on the show sometime.
Sure. No, but that's helpful. I mean, influencer marketing, how it has existed, we've had influencer and creator marketing agencies on the show, breaking this down. We've had whole episodes. I think I've done maybe 3 or 4 of them where just creator marketing agencies hired by a lot of labels. I don't know if Partisan's hired any of them, but where they have networks of thousands of creators of all sizes. And they pay them a certain amount of money, anywhere from $20, $30, $50 up to thousands of dollars, depending on their size and their reach and what they're doing, to use one of their artists' songs in their videos. And you do that enough, and sure, maybe 80% of them don't really do anything, but 20% of those creators move, and those videos influence other users to make their own videos with that same song, or they create a trend or something like that. And that's the goal. And that's how, like, oftentimes we see songs go viral. I'm curious, with this Cigarettes After Sex coming full circle, back to this, song that's now going viral on TikTok. Did you have anything to do with this trend, or with Nothing's Gonna Hurt You Baby kind of re-emerging and going viral on TikTok?
Actually, no. So
wild. Okay, great, cool.
No, look, like, I think that cigarettes is an anomaly in that regard, because it's genuinely been organic and continues to be to the extent that it has been. I think that the principle of what works for your art, what works for your music, what works for your fans, you should always stick to that. And so we've always worked with the band, with Sigs, with that principle in mind. And so putting our thumb on the scale of anything with them is always a big conversation. And so, right now they're doing something on TikTok with fans, where fans are, or maybe it's Instagram, I don't remember which, but fans are they have message boxes at their shows, and fans will make bracelets with messages on, and they put them in the box, and then the band will like post some of their favorites, right? So, cool. but this is like something that is more about fan relationship than it is about trying to create some kind of virality. So that is unfortunate. Well, maybe I think it's preparation and opportunity, right? It's that lock word again. For them, it's exactly. Not a good example. But for example, like Ezra Collective, that this is a band that we know how good the music is. It's won the Mercury Prize in the UK. We need them to reach. We know there's an audience for it in the US. They're just miles behind in the USA versus the UK. And so certainly reaching out to and having like some kind of influencer strategy and a TikTok strategy for them. We haven't necessarily seen like TikTok video creations go viral, but we're seeing multiple songs in like Shazam charts and in Spotify viral charts. So I feel like there's stuff. The team are doing things all the time to try things out. You have to stay nimble. There's so many options. You have to try things out and see what works. And it's always different for every artist, in my experience.
Definitely. I want to pivot a little bit. And before I let you go, just talk about Orca, this organization that you and so many other indie labels, including like Because and Beggars Group and City Slang, Domino, Everlasting, Hopeless, Ninja Tune, Playground, Secret City, Sub Pop, Secretly, and I think I got most of them. And you come together to create this, Orca. Well, tell me about it. The Organization for Recorded Culture and Arts. What is it, and why did you guys decide to come together for this initiative or this project?
Yeah, it's a think tank, and it's really a think tank. And its purpose is to invest in reports with meaningful data on specifically the independent sector, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it won't collaborate with other stakeholders on shared interests. I think that the independent sector, the word independent has been used to describe so many different types of music company now, or record label, or DIY distributor, or major label deals where the artist retains ownership of their copyrights, or major label services arms divisions. So, it's a way for all of those stakeholders, and it can be an evolving sponsorship over time. I think they're more sponsors rather than members because it's not an association.
Okay.
It's a way for us to unite around our independent investments in artist development. And that's because, as we spent so much time talking about specifically at the beginning of this conversation, the factors that we use to just drive our decision making can be very different from the majors. You said yourself that your experience with the majors is that they're commerce before music. And that's not that we're not businesses. We are. We have to be businesses in order to pay our artists, in order to pay the team to keep getting better, to keep doing great work. But in the global landscape where we have a lot of very rapidly changing technology that is bringing new formats and new, now it's AI, before it was video platforms, everything's changing all of the time. And the multinational companies have the loudest voices when talking to governments. And Orca isn't really just about speaking to legislators, although the reports that it's going to produce are going to be aimed more at people not in the music industry than inside the music industry. It's also going to be aimed at NGOs, the United Nations, because it's really founded on the principle that, not to sound trite, but like music makes the world a better place. That music is something that is so tied to humanity from as far back as any record keeping goes, in terms of ceremonies and celebrations and funerals, and it's just such it's an expression that is just a part of the human condition. And so the way that music can be used for social change often gets overlooked, especially when it comes to lawmaking, government funding, opportunities like that. And so, if we have like an increasingly capitalist society that has no funding for the arts, does that mean that the only people who are able to study and become musicians are going to be independently wealthy? We need to be thinking about these things and to make sure that music is an important part of school programming, etc. So these are some of the kind of big picture things, but I think that what's been so great about our conversation today in the context of Orca is really it's about understanding the job that labels are doing as well. Because there is, I think, there was a moment in time where there was a bit of a power correction, a level setting. And now I think it's great that artists have all of these options. And I think that the Orca labels would agree that that is a very, very good thing. But at the same time, our business models are not necessarily exactly the same as the major record companies. And yet often we're all considered to be like the behavior of labels. So that's kind of why I think that this group of companies have come together. And I think it's really exciting, actually. Like, I think that it's hard to get data from our sector. We're under-resourced. And even just pulling the data for our next report, which I can't tell you what it's on. Actually, the first report wasn't really a report. So we sent out we published in the summer. It'd be great if you could provide a link for your listeners.
Yeah,
Well.
I'll put you're talking about the 155 page full report, that one.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah,
But
it's great, and I read most of it. Believe it or not, it's really well done.
There should be a summary. There should be a summary.
There's an executive summary, but I mean, some of the things that I really appreciated from this report was the data, was some things that hadn't really been reported. Like there was this, section in there. It said that 77% of artists signed to independent labels choose to renew their contracts, continuing their career journey with an indie, which I thought was super fascinating because I think a lot of people think that artists use indies as stepping stones to the majors or something like that, which that's just not true at all when you have so many that decide to stay independent. There was another fascinating stat in there that from the British phonographic industry says the average cost of breaking an artist globally is put at between $485,000 and $1.8 million just to break an artist globally. Now we could spend an entire hour just talking about what it means to break an artist and what that even means. But just the fact that, there's that amount of money that oftentimes is invested into artists, and especially new and emerging artists, it helps put everything else into context, especially when we see the macro numbers of the industry made $30 billion globally just from recorded music last year. And, 30 to 35% was for the independent sector, and 65% was for the major sector. And it's kind of like understanding the macro numbers, but then getting more granular down to these individual use cases, which there's a bunch of really fascinating use cases from artists and other indie labels in this thing. So I do encourage everybody to at least browse through it, and we'll link to it. And I do appreciate that there is a think tank now of independent labels. And like you said, there, the majors have so much power and resources and, lobbying efforts for politicians, and they have mouthpieces and they're writing op-eds in the major trades all the time. And so to have kind of that balanced out just a little bit to provide another voice in the conversation with the indies, I think, it's really important. And I'm excited to see where you guys take it.
Yeah, me too. Thank you, Ari. Yeah, I think, I did a master's in entertainment law before I worked at a record company. And I remember looking for good studies to base my research on. And I don't know if there are any music business students out there, but I did feel in reading this 155 page that younger me would have really appreciated having this breakout of like how the independent ecosystem works and how the different players work together and what the revenue streams of a record company are. And, the number of people in my own family who have no idea what actually happens before the song that they hear on the radio or shared to them on their playlist or however the music comes to them appears. So let alone like key decision makers that might be able to ultimately help artists. And that's the thing, right? Like I think that we all need to, we know that the streaming economy has made things incredibly challenging, not just for artists, but artists first and foremost. The inflation, global inflation, has made touring incredibly challenging. The merch fees that now merchandise is how artists are paying for their tours, and now there's the merch fees are getting bigger. So it just feels like more and more and more the artist is the last person to get paid, and I think that we need to bring that out into the open and work together as industry stakeholders to increase the pie. It's not, should be understanding, not fighting against each other, labels and publishers, songwriters and artists, recording artists. It should be working together to say, hey, like this isn't great for anyone. And how do we respect the role that everybody plays? And how do we work together to make sure that we maximize value for everyone?
Love it. Zena, so great to chat with you. Such a pleasure. I have one final question that I ask everyone who comes on the show, and that is, what does it mean to you to make it in the new music business?
Well, I think to make it in the new music business is really about having choices, right? Like being able to find yourself in a position where you can make choices, that you can make choices about what kind of career that you want to have, that you can make choices about where you want to live, whether you want to have a family, how you want to do things. I think that's what making it means.
I love it. Zena White, thank you so much. That was great.
Thanks, Ari.
Today's episode was edited by Ari Davids with music by Grassroots District and produced by all the great people at Ari's Take.